Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. As we've talked about, we are barreling into spring. Hopefully things are opening up. Maybe we're going to have full stadiums in SEC football and in daylight saving time. So it's been a very long and challenging 12 months for all of us, but we've stuck together. We've bound together. We've had some tremendous guests, and a special guest today is a really dear friend of mine, one of my favorite people in the profession, and she is going to be a walking testament to a lot of things that we preach to you guys. Is that you get in the grind, work hard, don't be afraid to shed your skin, don't be afraid to try things new and different, and test your boundaries. And Ashley Smith, who's currently the founder of GSD Advisory, which is a marketing advice and strategy company, and has parked herself in Charleston, South Carolina, which was also tied into a wonderful lifestyle change that she made that I wish I could do, but has had just an amazing, illustrious career. Madison Square Garden, including their portfolios of the Beacon and Radio City Music Hall, some of the greatest places in the world. We've done a lot of work together during her role at ESPN and SEC Network. She works very closely with one of my favorite guys, Marcus Spears, who's an amazing rising talent within the ESPN organization. Spent 4 years working at Turner Broadcasting. We've talked a lot with some Turner folks, and they've been very, very involved in sports and entertainment, obviously. And was with Left Bank Organization, which was artist management on the music side, and worked with some of the biggest names ever, the Bee Gees, Blondie, Motley Crue, and started her career. And I've been hearing about her forever because some of my dearest friends in the world own or used to own Red Mountain Entertainment, and Gary Weinberger and Conrad Rayfield. So for years they say, hey, you got to meet this really, 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 really sharp girl, Ashley. And so we've always been destined to be together. Won't hold it against her. She's a graduate of the University of Alabama, but we have dear friends, many, many dear friends at Tuscaloosa. So Ashley Smith, welcome to Virtual Melt University. Been wanting to do this for a while.
Well, thank you, Vince. I've so enjoyed listening to these over the last several months, and I think you're doing a great, great service for these students. I really do.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, it's always something I've wanted to do. We've always had a great intern program, and then when things hit the fan, I'd always wanted to do it virtual anyway, and kids needed help, and it was a great way to reconnect with a lot of my friends like yourself, and then obviously if you would just inspire one person or one kid or help make that special connection. And there were so many of them calling, going, hey, my summer's kind of been blown up, this and that, and so it's really been a really great labor of love. But also from a business strategy, goodwill is good business. So we were helping kids. We were keeping Melt in a positive, forward-facing an industry that's been just clobbered, as well as showing the world that we were more than just an event marketing agency and much more than that. So a lot of really positive things. And I needed some things for some of my people to do because I wanted to keep them, but I needed a reason to keep them. So it's been a lot of craziness. But before we get into unpacking your illustrious career and where you see the future opportunities are, and you love to give back and be a servant leader as much as I do, but we always like to find out where this original passion for business or entrepreneurship or sports or entertainment, and where was this formed? Because like I said, way back when you were working with tremendous musical acts out of Birmingham, like I said, with some of my friends. But so where did this original passion, where did it come from?
It's a great question. So a lot of people assume that I'm from Alabama because I went to the university. I actually grew up in Virginia, and both of my parents are coaches. My dad was a head track and cross country coach for close to 30 years. My mom coached track for almost 10 years. And so I grew up first and foremost surrounded with sports. My dad also kept the stats for our high school football team. And I'm sure at that point, I probably wanted to go because I could just meet cute boys at the game.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it
That's important.
did, but what it taught me very early on was the X's and O's of football from a statistician's point of
Mm-hmm.
view, and to really watch the game and be able to break down, different parts of it. While I was in high school, I had two early jobs that I think set part of my stage. The first one was I was an assistant for the marketing department at our local mall.
Really?
And yes, and so here I was, 16 years old, and being able to interact with the the store managers for all these, big chains, the
Yeah.
Limited and what was that fun store that had all the wacky stuff in it?
Oh, not
Um,
Brookstone, but it was my favorite store in the world.
yes, what was that called? Anyway, we're dating ourselves.
It's gonna come back to me. But they used to have one in the Mobile Bel Air Mall,
Exactly.
and
And
I would go
so
in there, and they had the coolest stuff.
yes, what was that called? There's something with an S. Anyway,
Yep.
being able to liaison with those store managers and create radio promotions to drive traffic to the mall. Now, obviously, I didn't describe it like that then, but being
Right.
able to
But that's
learn
what you
that,
were
I think
doing.
it was, and it was a blast at 16. And the other job I had was I was a radio DJ at our local AM station. So I did
Wow.
the Friday night
What was your my radio handle was Jazzy V. What was your radio handle?
I just went by Ashley. I didn't have like a cool handle. I
You know, they
it's
say about
funny.
me, I got a face for radio. That's for sure.
That's funny. But I did Sunday morning bluegrass, which is a
Wow.
whole yes, and then I did Friday night more kind of top 40 request line. And again, that definitely led me to the quick story, my grandfather was an avid Alabama athletic supporter. One of his best friends in the war was an Alabama grad, and so he bought into the whole Crimson Tide phenomenon and Kobe
Really?
Bryant. And
So that's where this came from.
yes, and so
I'll be damned.
the rumor has it that at age 4 I pronounced that I was going to Tuscaloosa for college, and sure enough,
Wow.
it's the only school I applied to.
Hmm.
I
Wow.
yes, I was all in on the Crimson Tide. I grew up
And by the
I
way,
can
this was, you're not too much older, but this was pre-Saban too, right?
this was Gene Stallings' era.
Yeah. Because
So
when I go down there and lecture, it's fine. It's mind-boggling. I'll ask the students. I'm like, "Well, where are you from out of state?" And 60% of them will raise their hand. And I'm like, "Well, why did you go here?" And they go, "Well, of course, for Nick Saban." It's mind-boggling.
exactly. It is. And it's been astounding to me, to your point, to see that transition from the university. Because you're
Hmm.
100% right on that stat. It's 60% out of state now.
It's
And
crazy.
and when I went to Bama, my aspirations at that point were to be a broadcaster. I think that tease of radio had gotten
Hmm.
me excited. And so I that was my major. And what I learned as I, kind of went through my time in college was, I might have a better opportunity potentially behind the camera or behind the scenes than in front of the camera. And so
Hmm.
that is where, to your point earlier about the guys at New Era and Red Mountain, Conrad and Gary, and Jay Wilson, just
Best
phenomenal
guys
people.
ever. Yeah, oh, yeah.
I started working with some regional bands while I was in college. I learned how to do
But how
audio
did you do?
mixing.
But how did that happen? Like, I mean, you had to be out there hustling, right?
I mean, after a gig one night at the Ivory Tusk, again, I'm dating myself.
Right.
I went up to the sound engineer for it was a regional band called Metal Rose,
Hmm.
and they were a fun cover band. They played the Supper Club in Auburn,
I'm not
and
familiar with the War Eagle Supper Club, so Although I had a dinner conversation last night where I'm going to try to relicense the name and make some good, cool merch out of it, because it was
Oh, it would
probably,
actually
I
be
left a few brain
incredible.
cells there in my time.
By the way, one of my favorite venues of all time, despite it being in Auburn.
It's the best ever, other than the
The
Floribama, of course.
oh gosh, don't even get me started.
Right,
That's a whole
right.
separate podcast.
Yeah, that is a
So
separate podcast.
so I just, I think when you're younger, you don't have that filter of second guessing a little bit. And so
Hmm.
for me, one night after one of their gigs, I went up to the engineer and said, "Hey, I want to learn about the music business. And,
Wow.
next time you guys are in town, can I watch what you do?" And so that led to, I worked with them for about 2 years. Well, I was still going to school, but anytime they would play a show, pretty much in the state of Alabama or in
Yep.
Starkville, even, I would go and at sound check, they would let me really learn how to audio mix. And that is a skill
Wow.
set even to this
Oh my
day.
goodness. Oh yeah.
I think sometimes even producers at ESPN when I was there, they'd be like, "How do you know this?"
Right.
And because at that point I'd moved into a very different role. But that's a skill set you just never you don't really lose. And so from there, from that work, I did an internship with the team at New Era. And that really kind of then catapulted me into just an incredible early aspect of my career in the music business. And I like to tell people, Vince, I have two equal passions in life. The first one is 100% college sports. I love it.
Right. Right. Right.
I love everything about it. But my second personal passion is music. I try to go see a live band, local and or a national act, at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Right.
Now, obviously pre-COVID, but that's definitely something I
There's
very,
not.
very
I
much
tell you,
enjoy.
sports and music are the universal language.
They really are. And it's interesting. A lot of what I was able to accomplish in my role at ESPN was integrating music into some of their marketing efforts very early on that really hadn't been
Right.
done. And so yeah, so the other I would say from New Era, and to your point, they managed Brother Kane. And at
Yeah.
the time Brother Kane was on Virgin Records, they were touring with Aerosmith and Van Halen. And here I was, just this green recent college grad, and it was just an incredible opportunity to be out. I would go out on the road with them, do their tour advance press, liaisoning with their team at Virgin Records, and it gave me a very good hands-on experience about dealing with artists, um, understanding that
And the
psyche of
operative
a
word is dealing.
yes, people like to say in the music industry, "Oh, did he have LSD?" And it's lead singer disease, and um, and that's a combination of forgetfulness, uh, kind of some
I need to. I'm gonna
different
use that one
aspects.
day. I like that one.
It's a good one. Um, and from there, I had a few connections, and I was ready to leave Alabama at that point. I was living in
Right.
Birmingham and took a flyer and moved to Los Angeles sight unseen. Had never been there,
No
and
kidding.
isn't that crazy? But it was a risk. It was something that I think because of my family, um, I was very blessed that, and I know you're super close with your parents. My parents gave me an incredible foundation from a confidence perspective.
Right.
And I think even though they weren't psyched that I was moving across the country, I knew that they would be there if I just fell flat on my face. And so that gave me that confidence to do that.
Well, there's three things I want to unpack from the things you just said. Is that I think, and we hear this from our great guest, great successful people never stop having curiosity. We
Hmm.
never stop grinding, and we're not afraid to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. And let me just tell you this: I think in COVID and post COVID, our generation of listeners, our generation of students, This is the first time they've ever been sent into the tumble cycle, and obviously are learning that life is not linear, and don't you think that, because Ashley, one thing I was experiencing running a big company and having a lot of younger generation is that they had expectations that they would become the CEO after 3 months, and if they didn't, they just
Oh,
flip
yeah.
out and go get another job. And I'm like, wait, it doesn't work this way. And like,
No.
you don't know, you can't tell anything about any relationship after 3 months, any type of relationship. But so stop benchmarking. But the market overnight went from a seller's market to talent to a buyer's market for talent. And I think that this is not necessarily a bad thing. And COVID has been crazy, but some of the silver linings is a little bit of more of a respect and understanding of the way things actually are. Not everybody is Mark Zuckerberg, who hits Facebook, and he even went through his own trials and tribulations. But you're not the CEO overnight. And but I want you to talk about your philosophy of curiosity and the grind and the hustle, and really, I mean, you got to be fearless to push yourself out of a comfort zone, and to do it multiple times is pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. I think that for me, I go back to my early time in my music career where I was a junior publicist. When I moved to Los Angeles, I got a early my first job was at a firm named Rogers and Cowan.
Well, that's just a
And
small little firm, but yeah.
and I was the assistant to the SVP of the music department. And he's kind of a legend in the music business,
Uh-huh.
PR. His name's Sandy Friedman, just an amazing, amazing man. And what I learned from that, I would sit in his office, Vince. Now he rolled into the office at 7 a.m. So this is LA
Mm-hmm.
time
Right.
because he said New York's open. They're
Yeah.
working. So
True.
that meant I got there at 6:30.
Yep.
And because I wanted to be ready, but more importantly, I used that time. I would just sit in his office and listen to him pitch and learned his style and his approach with at the time these editors. And once I got promoted from his assistant to a junior publicist, that skill set of cold calling and being comfortable, you know, just picking up the phone, calling somebody and wanting to talk to them about Leanne Rhymes, I think is a skill set that has blessed me my entire career.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
I tell mentees of mine a lot who are in college now, I'm like, you've got to I look at things, what's the worst thing that'll happen? They won't
Yeah.
call you back. They
Yeah.
won't email you back. Well, okay, then you have nothing to lose. I think um I I do agree with you that there is a sentiment right now from the workforce and kind of rising graduates of expectations. When I moved to
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles, different time, I get that. I made $19,000. I
Yeah.
mean,
I get
nothing.
it.
But the experience that gave me is invaluable. It's just you can't quantify it.
Right.
So I would say that. I think the other thing for me that's always motivated me, I think you're spot on with the curiosity. I genuinely love learning about new industries. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think the skill sets that we learn in sports and entertainment, and because of the pace of these industries, when you go and apply them to other sectors, I think they're wowed by it. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that's a pivot I've had to make
Well, I was going to say,
this year.
you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone again. You've taken on some non-sports,
Yes,
things, right?
yes, I've taken on a couple of healthcare consulting projects
Mm-hmm.
this past
Mm-hmm.
year, and it's still marketing. It's still helping them with
Right.
their
Right. Right.
brand strategy and their media plans and whatnot. But I think had COVID not happened, I would not have been pushed out of into exploring that field. It's now given me a whole new
Right.
kind of a whole new area of experience that I'm very grateful for. Um, so yeah, I think you're spot on with the grind. It's having that tenacity and that internal drive to reach out to people and to something that it's been shocking to me, if I'm being honest, in the last couple of years that I've noticed a trend is I'm the first person to do an informational interview. I respect so much when people have the courage to reach out to me and ask, hey, can
Mm-hmm.
I, can we go for coffee? Can you give me 15 minutes on the phone? What's been a surprisingly unpopular trend in my book in the last couple of years is no thank you notes.
Oh my God, you just hit my biggest hot button in the world.
And I'm like, wow, I
Mm-hmm.
took 45 minutes or an
My
hour and gave
time.
you and gave you tons of guidance and advice. And you and what that says to me is, okay, maybe they didn't, I don't know if they didn't value it or if they didn't, but it's like so much of job seeking right now is top of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, the reality is if there's a marketing coordinator position or a digital media role, they have to your point, it's a buyer's market, 500 qualified candidates
Easy.
easily. And it's going to be a matter of who's top of mind, who's um, followed up, who's kind of left a good impression. And that's what I would definitely reinforce to students is to have the courage and the perseverance to reach out for that interview, but then follow up and say
Mm-hmm.
thanks.
Well, um, here's the thing, and you've hit on several things. Is one, it's only as important as you make it. There's never,
Hmm.
a personal touch, and I learned that from Coach Bill Battle, writing the handwritten notes.
Oh yes.
And it the this whole people are caught up in it being a job application. It's a job process. It's a job audition. They've got as much
Hmm.
time as it takes to pass a billboard on the interstate to get Ashley Smith's attention. And my theory is, I use a fishing analogy. It used to be 100 casts to get 8 job leads to get 2 job bites. Now it's going to be 500 to get 8 to get 2 because of so many unemployed people willing to take a lesser salary and a lesser job, and it's going to be a brutal market. So these intangibles that are going to get and keep your attention. And here's another thing I'll tell you, it's going to shock you. And I kind of do this by design. We
Hmm.
have a generic website, email address called careers@meltatl. You will be shocked, maybe you won't, at how many resumes I get that says, to whom it may concern, here's my resume, here's how much I need to make. And do you know what I automatically do with that?
I hope you trash it.
I don't even look at it. It could be the Pope. It could be Elvis coming back. And I would never know it because I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like in the old days, I had to go to the library and I had to go Yellow Pages and encyclopedias. And these people have got it in the palm of their hands. And then what about the effort? What about playing to the ego? What about the emotional connection, low hanging fruit? Hey, Miss Smith, I noticed you're a University of Alabama grad. Roll Tide, even though I went to Georgia.
Exactly.
They're showing you the intangibles, but I'm telling you,
I
you would be shocked at what we see.
Well, I think you and I've talked about this, but I'm on the board of the communication school at Alabama now, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the key pieces of advice that I give to students there, and I'll share it with your listeners, is activate that alumni base both from your
Oh my
college,
God.
but as well as your
Yes.
conference. Because to your point, if I get a LinkedIn request from somebody that takes those extra 2 minutes to research where I went to school and to reference, hey, I went to Vandy, hey, I went to Ole Miss, I'd like to talk to you, that is immediately an engagement that distinguishes them from the others. And I think while you're in school, it may not be quote unquote cool to talk about that, but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think it's a connecting opportunity for students once they're out in job searching.
Well, I mean, by the way, it's going to make the difference.
Yes.
And I don't. I mean, and you call us old school or whatever you want, but and that's another thing you touched on that I want to unpack, and I really wish I had learned this at an earlier age, and I didn't, and it's led to some of my worst professional mistakes. But you really can't take anything personal. You really can't. I mean, no does not. You can't take it personal. You don't know what led to that person to turning you down for the job or all those types of things. And again, no doesn't not the first two letters of no. It's spell no. It's the first two letters of not yet. But
Which I
people
love
say
that.
Vince, what business are you in? I say I'm in the rejection business. I get told no every day, and you just got to keep coming back and being relentless because and now in this market, as tough as it's going to be, you really cannot take it personal, right?
You really can't. And I will say I'm very blessed. The president and owner of the Left Bank organization, which was the last music agency where I worked. It was an artist management firm. A guy named Alan Kovac, who he was a tough cookie, and I learned early on in working with him. To your point, to not take anything personally. He was criticizing. He'd be critiquing the work, or
Right.
maybe he didn't agree with a PR pitch or a PR approach that I presented. But it was hearing that feedback and acting on it.
Right.
And I think you gotta if you're gonna work in sports and entertainment or aspire to work in sports and entertainment, you definitely need to have some thick skin. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell people that all the time because you're gonna hear, to your point, no, a lot more than you hear yes.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
hopefully what you've done is built up the relationships where you hear no, you hear no, you hear no, but then ding ding ding, that fourth opportunity is a yes. And that's what it's about. I think having that kind of backbone to stick with it. You have to be able to persevere in that.
You damn sure do, and so I want to talk about too, and I think you're one of the masters of it. The importance and value of relationship building and relationship maintenance. So I say the
Mm.
first two letters of relationship start with an RE, and the
Mm-hmm.
first two letters of reciprocal start with an RE. And people say, Vince, how have you represented Coca-Cola for 21 years? And I go, it's very simple. I never take the relationship for granted. And every relationship, personal, professional, business, romantic, whatever it is, family, you've got to cultivate it like a flower or a plant. You've got to trim it and groom it and water it and fertilize it and give it sun and all that. And like I said, and particularly in the industries of which we're in, sports and music and entertainment, you think the world is so big, but it's actually very, very small. So I want you to talk about, sort of your philosophy and share with our students on relationships.
So I learned this early on, to your point, in my career, that it's super important to reach out to people not when you need something. I think that's sometimes a default, like, oh, I called Bob last week because I needed
Right.
something.
Not
And
transactional.
exactly. And I set aside, now I'm pretty OCD, so I set aside 3 hours each week on my calendar where I take that time to send emails or send a text, depending on who it is, to people. Like, hey, I saw this piece that ran about your company, looked great, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's truly, I think, it's really, I think, helped me in my career. It's also genuine, and I think people have a little bit stronger of a BS filter these days.
They do. They
and
do.
um, and so I definitely try to do that in a way where staying on top of the business, but then more importantly,
Mm-hmm.
staying connected with those people.
Right.
So, and this as well. It's reciprocal in that, hey, I might have some insights and some behind the curtain information that they could benefit from,
Right.
just like they could have an opportunity for me. And I also, I think I genuinely like people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I am definitely that person that during COVID was very happy to do, tons of Zooms a day to stay connected with people.
Right.
And
Well, it's a different set of rules now. Now, hopefully, it gets back to some form of normalcy, but I'm not sure business travel and offices and all this stuff is
right.
ever going to come back 1,000%. I mean, there's some things about it I miss and some I don't.
Well, that's interesting you say that. I definitely don't miss the grind of
Yeah,
work travel, that aspect
it's
of it, right?
brutal.
Um, where you're, basically rolling into your home to unpack and repack for the next
Right.
day. And I think it's easy from the outside to like, oh, when you had to go to the Super Bowl or you had to go to the
Hmm.
SEC tournament or what have you. But I'm like, yeah, but you're working, from 7
No,
to
we're
11.
on. I mean, they don't get it. Hey, it's cool that you're running around with Marcus Spears, but I mean, you're on. I mean, you're his
Right,
representative, and
exactly.
yeah,
And it's and but I will say, while I don't miss that, I do miss the, to your point, like running into people that you maybe do only see once a quarter or once
right,
a year at certain
right,
events. And so given that, I think being able to text and or email some of those relationships in this last year has
right.
become much more important and valuable. Um, I think for me right now, as you did many, many years ago and launching your brand of Melt, I am still getting my company name out there, and so it's important that I do email from that company address. And so but I think at the core, it's take 5 minutes to just reach out to somebody and say, hey, and just connect with them. I think that's the number one aspect for me about relationships that continue to work.
And like I said, sometimes you'll call me or I'll call you, and we're not looking for anything, not no transactions or anything like that, or she's like, hey, you good? You need some help, et cetera, et cetera, and you just because you never know when it's going to come back around, and you got that that goodwill out there, you got it out there in the universe. You just never know,
Absolutely.
when you really may need somebody. So I want to talk about in the perch that you occupy, and obviously you've had you worked your way through college, fed a stellar career, and you've achieved excellence, and it's not an accident when you achieve excellence multiple times over and over. But where you sort of sit right now, we know that the sports business is undergoing the most seismic change ever. What do I mean by
Hmm.
that? You've got, empowerment by college student athletes. You've got multimillionaire athletes making massive investments in businesses. You've got legal wagering coming on. You've got fans safely returning back. You've got fantasy. You've got data analytics. I mean, what is cord cutters. You've got cable business going away. You've got student athletes being paid for their endorsement. So, from the perch that you sit, where do you see these future opportunities? And I tell our students that the campus is the ultimate professional laboratory. What do they mean? What do they need to be doing now to get themselves? Because here's the flip side of being in the tumble cycle. This is the most sophisticated consumer in the world. They're digital natives. They are
Hmm.
driving. They were driving consumption patterns before COVID, and now look at. I mean, who goes to a shopping mall now? Like you get your food delivered at home all the time. I mean, like you're watching Netflix. They don't run ads. I mean, where I interviewed Michelle McKenna, the CIO of the NFL, the other day, and she's like, I don't hire anybody with a sports background. They're accountants and engineers and technologists and statisticians and coders. And I'm like, oh my goodness, has nothing to do with sports, but the game within what she's producing.
Well, and I think she's spot on there. I think the traditional, when I first went to ESPN, as an example, there was, a quiz that was given by, at that point, John Walsh. That was
Mm-hmm.
basically and he was, for the listeners, he was the executive editor and head of, I don't remember what his exact title, but he was kind of like the guru of all things you saw on ESPN in the early 2000s. And he would give prospective hires a sports quiz, really about the X's and O's of the game. And I think, or the games. And I think to her point, now there's so much analytics and data that drives sports decisions, that the opportunities for career paths in quote unquote sports is enormous. Um, I think right now, to me, one of the biggest challenges that I think both on the collegiate level as well as on the professional level that is going to have to be solved, and I think it is a big opportunity for Generation Z, is venue experience
Mm-hmm.
and really understanding what that consumer wants when they
We
go
hear
to a
that.
venue and what their expectation is as far as connectivity and that third screen, or not third screen, but just a screen experience. And I think the data, you look at the other part to me that's fascinating, I think right now, I think even up to a decade ago, gambling was a bad term, right?
Right. Well, you couldn't
And
say, you'd have to say it was gambling. I mean, you couldn't say it.
exactly. But now, even just this week, Darren Ravel, which PS listeners, if you want to work in sports, follow Darren Ravel on
Right.
Twitter,
Right.
shared, a very interesting nugget about the data that places like William Hill and FanDuel are collecting.
It's
And
unbelievable.
to your yes, and to your point, how that's going to be used both by leagues, by venues, by third party sponsors and consumer products. It's really getting into, I think, a pretty broad job opening opportunity. And I think what you can't limit yourself to, in my opinion, when you're job searching is, I want to be a marketing manager. Because, by the way, marketing manager is such a generic term right now. And so I think encouraging yourself to be open to the possibilities and
Mm-hmm.
being able to um, understand that your first or second job out of college isn't your final job. And one of the things
Bingo.
that
Bingo.
oh my gosh, like it's, I impress upon my mentees so often that, hey, take this job because, by the way, it's a good opportunity with a good company. Do it for a year. I do agree with you. I think anything less than a year, I personally don't think you get the experience that you're really looking for, and build from there. But to kind of constantly sit on the sidelines, I'll use a sports analogy,
Mm-hmm.
waiting for that perfect opportunity to get called into the game, you're just, I just don't think that maybe the sports world is your place then, if that's kind of the way
Right.
you're
Right.
approaching it.
Right.
You've got to be a utility player and you've got to be able
And,
to,
and I tell you, a lot of these kids just were not, prior to the pandemic. I mean, they weren't willing to do it, and they'd flip out on me after 2 or 3 months, and I'm like, you're making a big mistake here. But those days are over, by the way.
oh yeah, you've got to, I think, put in the work. What I always say is, like, you definitely always want to have a voice and speak up, but also,
Correct.
you know, listen. I think I look back, like
Amen.
I was referencing some of those early days, especially in my music career. Um, it just listening to how those senior executives at the time spoke with artists and handled situations, it certainly informed me. And then that's something I carried on all the way up to your point, like, one of my clients right now with Marcus Spears, and
Mm-hmm.
how I engage with him, and understand the dynamic of, if he just had a 5 day on shift, I'm not hitting him on Friday afternoon with a whole new plan.
Bingo.
It's like, read the room.
Right. Or maybe even use some common sense.
Well, yes,
Actually,
that's
I've started to hire again for the first time in a year because I lost millions in revenue. And this young person had been hounding me for 6 months for a job interview and a job, and then they really were qualified. And I still was reticent about starting to hire again because we're not over COVID yet, particularly in the event space. And I made what I thought was a reasonably good qualified job offer. And the first thing they wanted to do was negotiate the price. And I'm like, and I go, well, I don't know what planet you've just landed on, but I'm getting 1,000 resumes a week. And you finally got to the altar, and you and in the spirit of you marry like you date, and this is the first thing you want to do. And guess what I did? I rescinded the offer. And then they were like, well, that's what I was just taught in school. And I'm like, you were taught that in school by a bunch of people who've never met a payroll. Oh, and by the way, we're in a 100-year pandemic in an industry that's been 100% decimated.
Vince, I was going to say you're spot on with that last point. 2 years ago, perhaps in a different market cycle, did that student or I'm sorry, potential employee have maybe the leverage to negotiate? Maybe. But again,
actually, when I was an entry level, I was just grateful to be in there, and then I knew I could prove myself. I mean,
exactly. And it's a
different mindset.
Let me assure you, when I got some of my first, those early jobs, and even my first job when I moved from Los Angeles to New York for ESPN, they made me an offer and I was like, great, sign me up.
Right. I'll be there in the morning. And I wrote them a thank you note.
Spot on. You're spot on for that.
So let me ask you, I want to ask you a fun question. So what would a young Ashley Smith at University of Alabama do right now if and when knowing that the name, image, and likeness is about to pass and that student athletes can be compensated? What would you do if you were a student back on campus now? And what would you advise the students? Because I think it's going to be the biggest thing that's ever happened in college sports in many, many years.
I will tell you, I would march my happy little butt down to Coleman Coliseum, and I would meet some of the incoming freshmen and sophomore on the Alabama basketball team.
Bingo.
And that is it is a shooting star program right now under Coach Nader.
Yeah, Nate's a big boy.
Those players, and by the way, they don't want to, do anything with social media or whatnot.
Right.
But if you're a prospective marketing person, say, I'll help you with that. Now, obviously, I know there's some rules with coaches about social media and whatnot.
No, I get that. But let's just assume that but what amazing opportunity is it going to be for kids?
Vince, one of the things that it really baffled me, I'm not going to lie, a couple of years ago, a student from Alabama called and wanted to do an informational interview. Classic, I want to get into sports, blah, blah, blah. My first question was, have you gone to the athletic department? And, there's an incredible team in both from Crimson Tide Marketing, the AD on down. No, I said, you have the one of the top 5 brands in all of sports.
Yeah.
A mile from you.
Yeah.
And that's your opportunity. Like, by the way, to be able to put on your resume that you worked on the Alabama men's swim team social program, or that you don't have to do Tua's Instagram.
I know.
and I think that really was eye-opening to me, because I was like, wow, there's this incredible opportunity right down the street. And by the way, that's true whether you're at the University of Alabama,
it doesn't matter,
Auburn, or App State. There's so many.
I know.
And I think I've heard you say this on earlier podcasts, the incubation opportunities for students at their colleges. It's just incredible, and you've got to seize those. And it speaks volumes to, I think, your drive if you are seizing those, or if you're sitting on the sidelines.
Well, we're looking for those, those intangibles, and as I keep continuing to tell the students, like, guys, this is not an application. This is a process. This is an audition. You've got busy people, like Ashley. But and the other thing is that it's not that hard to establish those emotional connections and show those intangibles and show that effort. And hey, Miss Smith, and Roll Tide, and see you had an illustrious music career, entertainment career, sports career. I want to connect with you for 15 minutes with advice. It's just not that hard. And like I said, all of these tools are in the palm of their hand. They can look at the people you're linked in with, or I'm linked in with, and could spend days mining those leads and connections and saying, hey, Mr. Thompson, I notice you're connected to Miss Smith. So, and then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, well, somebody's done their homework at least. And, and by the way, that's no different what you and I are doing, just at a different level.
Well, you're exactly right. And it just shows the potential type of employee that you're going to be.
Bingo.
I feel confident that if I put you on the phone with a client, that you're going to have done your due diligence and understand that, what their background is, what their schedule is. It just shows that extra oomph, and
Right.
I think in a buyer's market that counts. I'll give you a great example. When I was at ESPN, I was hiring for a new marketing coordinator role. I had two amazing candidates, like just interviewed great. On paper, they were great. You know who got the job? True story. The one that sent me Roll Tide cupcakes.
Bingo.
And you know what?
I know.
I don't know what that cost her as far as like she went and ordered them and had them, customized Roll Tide on it. But it was the deciding factor. It was the thing that put her over the edge. And she's still there and has done great. So it was a great hire.
Well, but think about just the thought process that person went through and make the effort, and they were showing you, hey, this is the type of employee I'm going to be for you. And I think, I think the intangibles are still going to carry the day. I think that, I believe getting to the other side of this pandemic, it is going to be a renaissance and a golden period for the business of sports and the opportunity for this generation, because they do have an innate understanding of these things far greater than I do. With the social media and the branding, and that's why I say, hey, look, you gotta be a guardian of your own brand out there. Because it's okay to be authentic and all that, but one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go look at your social media profile, because I'm not looking. Thank God there wasn't Facebook when I was at Auburn, but we're not looking for whether or not you had fun. We're looking at the judgment you're displaying and showing people that your behavior. That's what we keep trying to say about the intangible.
One of the things that I used to do is, while the candidate was sitting in my office, I would turn my screen around and I would say, let's Google you and see what comes up.
Oh, God.
And I did that because I think, as to your point, this is a generation that's kind of lived out their lives on social media. Thank God Sigma Chi Derby Days wasn't broadcasted.
Or Fiji Island.
Yes. Was not broadcast on Instagram. And I think it's just to kind of say, hey, and my barometer, and people can take this or not, my barometer for social media was, would you show the picture to your grandmother? And if you would,
I call it the grandma test.
I think it's for me, that's always a good gut check. It's like, if you would show this to your grandmother, okay. Now, I realize that varies for certain people, but to me, that's a good litmus test for social media appropriate.
I love that. I call it the grandma test.
It's a good one. It works. But I definitely, I think students right now have the opportunity to spin what's happened in this last year as a positive, as a skill set for how they have overcome adversity. And it's how you approach it. And it's what you did during this pandemic, right? Like, hey, I had to now take organic chemistry online, and that was extremely difficult. And here's why. Or you can
Ashley, you want me to tell you, and I know you're going to believe this. You and I talk about this a lot. Do you know? I believe what the new litmus test is going to be coming out of COVID in the job market,
What?
employer market. What did you do to improve yourself or others during COVID? Did you binge watch,
Mm-hmm.
binge drink, binge sleep, binge game, or did you learn a new skill, learn a new trait? Did you promote it about it? Did you use it to inspire others? Did you learn empathy? What did you do? And if they can't answer that, the interview is basically over.
Exactly. I think it's this has been a once in a lifetime event, and how
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
decided
100
to,
years, I'd say.
you know, how you decided to deal with it is going to speak volumes. And I at least, I have a couple of mentees that hopefully are listening at Bama right now, and that's one of the things that we've really talked a lot about
Mhm.
is really how to share what you've done during this last year
Right.
in overcoming the adversity of your senior year online, or whatever the
Yeah.
different
Yeah, yeah.
circumstances are. I'll tell you, everybody has their thing, right? For me, a skill that I always looked for, especially when hiring kind of entry level roles, was has somebody waited tables or bartended. And the
Bingo.
reason for me that always clicked was you worked with a team, you could multitask, you understood customer service in theory, otherwise you weren't making any tips. so,
Bingo.
um, and that's certainly not the end all be all, but to me that was always a good barometer of someone who I think at various different organizations where I was hiring, that was usually a good result.
Well, you just said, and I think you're reading out of my playbook, but I say, hey, look, um, you weren't just serving coffee. You weren't just a barista. You were on the front lines of consumer behavior, serving hundreds of customers a day while working your way through college. Who the hell is not going to respond to that in a positive manner, as opposed to saying I worked at a
Exactly.
coffee shop? I mean, and when I tell that to kids, their eyes just go light up and they go, "Wow, yeah, you're right." I said, "Hey, if you can work on the service industry, front desk of hotels, waitressing, waitering, serving coffee, you can dang sure pretty much do anything, because I
Yes.
mean that is true. That is the true front line. So this has been so good. I knew it was going to
Oh,
be even.
fun.
I mean, believe it or not, we've almost been talking an hour. It's like,
Oh
two
my
old
gosh.
neighbors having a cup of coffee, and I think you're going to get a tremendous amount of feedback. Ashley Smith, who is now the founder of GSD Advisory, but just an unbelievable career, the most vaunted names: Madison Square Garden, ESPN, Turner Broadcasting, some of the greatest bands and music of all time. Some of the greatest shows that I ever saw in my life was when I lived in Birmingham from '85 to '99, and a member of the UA College of Communication Board of Visitors. We've been very involved down in University of Alabama. Tremendous kids coming out of there. So Ashley, we really enjoyed it. We hope you get a lot of positive feedback, and keep grinding and plowing those fields. We appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks for having me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. Roll Tide.
Yeah. Well, here the greatest, biggest story in the next 3 years in college football is, what is Nick Saban's sunset
Oh,
strategy, and who takes his place?
don't remind me that this era is going to end at some point.
Well, as an Auburn man, it's up to me to continue to propagate this type of discussion.
I
Because
like it.
because there's no such thing as parachuting at sunsetting at Auburn. It's called golden parachuting. So if you can't coach, get a job at Auburn and get $20 million exit package. So we'll talk about that. That's another soapbox for another day. I get paid
I
that
like,
to fail every day. It's amazing. It's so much. It's so amazing. So
hey, I'd love
I've
to have
never
a day.
had one of those packages, by the way.
P.S. Nor have I. And then he got to, head on down to Walt Disney
Yeah,
World.
he didn't even let the grass grow under him. I was like, hey, why don't you just go down to 30A or Lake Martin for a day or two? But Gus and Christy back in the saddle, so more power to them. But anyway, Ashley Smith, one of the best ever. We love you. We thank you for your time on Melt University and Virtual Melt University, and hopefully we will see you soon.
Thanks, Vince. We hope you've enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with a new edition of Melt University 2021.